I didn't cry when I found out my family had stolen almost every dollar I'd saved over 8 years. I smiled. Because while they were celebrating what they thought was their biggest victory, they had no idea I had already beaten them at their own game. My name is Melissa Sinclair. I'm 31 years old, and until 6 months ago, I believed I had the kind of family everyone dreams about. I was wrong. Growing up, my parents always said family comes first. They taught my younger sibling and me to always stick together, no matter what. I believed every word. After college, I landed a job at a marketing company in Chicago. The pay wasn't amazing at first, but I worked hard, earned promotions, and eventually became a senior account manager. For 7 years, I lived below my means. I skipped expensive vacations. I drove the same old Honda. I rarely bought designer clothes. Every bonus, every raise, and every tax refund went straight into my savings account. I had one dream. To buy my own home. A beautiful house with a backyard in a quiet neighborhood where I could finally build the life I'd always imagined. I thought I was getting closer every single month. What I didn't know was that my own family had been quietly making plans for my money. And I was about to overhear a conversation that would change everything. That morning started like any other. I grabbed my coffee, checked my emails, and settled into my desk, expecting another routine Tuesday. Instead, it became the day my entire life changed forever. My boss, Richard Collins, wasn't the kind of man who called employees into his office unless something important had happened. So when his assistant appeared beside my desk and said, "Melissa, Mr. Collins wants to see you," my stomach tightened. I quickly replayed everything I'd done over the past week. Had I missed a deadline? Was a client unhappy? Had I made an expensive mistake? The walk to his office felt much longer than usual. I knocked gently. "Come in," he called. When I stepped inside, he stood up with a wide smile and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Melissa." I blinked. "For what?" "You've earned it." I looked at him, completely confused. "We've decided to promote you to senior account director." For a moment, I couldn't speak. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside was my new employment contract. My salary had increased by nearly 40%. There was also a performance bonus, additional stock options, and a generous relocation allowance if I ever wanted to move closer to headquarters. I stared at the numbers, convinced I was reading them wrong. Is this real?" I whispered. Richard laughed. "You've been one of the hardest working people in this company for years. Frankly, this promotion is overdue." I felt tears gathering in my eyes. I had sacrificed so much. Long nights. Weekend projects. Missed birthdays. Skipped vacations. Finally, it was paying off. When I left his office, I couldn't stop smiling. The first person I wanted to tell was my mom. She always said she was proud of me. Surely she'd be excited. I called her during my lunch break. She answered on the second ring. "Melissa. Is everything okay?" "I've got amazing news," I said, barely able to contain my excitement. "I just got promoted." There was a brief silence. Then she replied, "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Her voice sounded strangely flat. Before I could say anything else, she sighed dramatically. "Your father hasn't been feeling well again." The excitement inside me faded instantly. "What happened?" "The doctor wants more tests. They're expensive." "I'll help," I said without hesitation. "You always do," she replied softly. That evening, I transferred another $8,000 into my parents' account. I told myself it was the right thing to do. After all, family comes first. I had no idea that money wasn't paying for hospital bills at all. It was paying for something else. Something that would leave me questioning every memory I'd ever had of the people I trusted most. The next few weeks flew by. Between adjusting to my new position and learning my new responsibilities, I barely had time to breathe. Still, every Sunday evening, I called my parents. And every Sunday, the conversation somehow ended the same way. "Your father's condition isn't improving. The insurance still isn't covering everything. The doctors want another procedure." Each time, I sent more money. $5,000. $3,000. $10,000. I never questioned it. Why would I? They were my parents. Then one Friday afternoon, my younger sister, Emily Sinclair, called me out of the blue. "Melissa. Guess what?" "What?" "We're finally going on our dream vacation." I smiled. "Really?" That's great. Where are you going? Miami. She sounded so excited. I've wanted to go forever. I laughed. You deserve it. Have fun. She suddenly went quiet. Oh. What? I wasn't supposed to tell you. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Nothing. Forget I said anything. Before I could ask another question, she hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. Something didn't feel right. My parents had been telling me they were drowning in medical debt. So, how could they suddenly afford a luxury vacation? I tried to convince myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe someone else was paying. Maybe they'd won a travel package. Maybe. I was overthinking. But the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. The following Saturday, I decided to surprise my parents with a visit. I stopped by a bakery and bought my dad's favorite apple pie. On the drive over, I kept imagining how happy they'd be to see me. When I pulled into the driveway, something immediately caught my attention. A brand new black luxury SUV was parked outside. My father had always complained they couldn't afford to replace their 15-year-old sedan. So whose vehicle was this? As I walked toward the front door, I heard laughter coming from inside. Then I heard my mother's voice. Melissa will never figure it out. Everyone burst into laughter. I froze. My hand stopped inches from the doorknob. Then my father spoke. As long as she believes I'm sick, she'll keep sending money. My blood ran cold. I slowly stepped closer to the living room window. What I saw shattered my heart. My parents, my sister, and two of their closest friends were raising champagne glasses, celebrating with money I believed had gone toward saving my father's life. And then my mother said something that made me realize the betrayal was even worse than I had imagined. Wait until she sends the next payment. Then we can finally buy the beach house. I couldn't breathe. Every instinct told me to storm into the house and demand an explanation. Instead, I stayed perfectly still. Years of working with difficult clients had taught me one important lesson. People reveal the most when they think no one is listening. So I listened. My mother took another sip of champagne and laughed. I told you pretending Robert needed expensive treatments would work. My father, who was supposedly too sick to leave his bed, grinned as he carved another slice of cake. I almost felt bad the first few times. Everyone laughed. Emily rolled her eyes. Dad, don't get soft now. Melissa has always been the responsible one. She loves playing the hero. My chest tightened. So, one of my mother's friends asked, how much has she sent altogether? Mom smiled proudly. I stopped counting after $300,000. 300,000. The words echoed in my mind. That wasn't just money. That was 8 years of overtime. 8 years of skipped vacations. 8 years of saying no to myself. Gone. Emily picked up her phone and smirked. She actually apologized last week because she couldn't send more until payday. The room exploded with laughter. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped the pie I was holding. Then my father spoke again. She'll send another payment soon. Once she gets her next bonus, we'll finally have enough for the beach house. Beach house? So that was where my money had gone. Not hospital bills. Not medication. Not surgeries. Luxury vacations. A new SUV. Designer clothes. And now, a beach house. At that moment, something inside me changed. The woman who always put her family first was gone. I quietly backed away from the window before anyone noticed me. I placed the untouched apple pie on the front porch. Then I got into my car and drove away. No tears. No screaming. No confrontation. Just silence. Because they thought I was naive. They thought I would keep believing every lie. They had no idea I worked with financial reports every single day. If anyone knew how to follow money, it was me. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. First, I was going to uncover every single lie. Then, I was going to make sure they regretted ever using Melissa Sinclair as their personal ATM. The next morning, I did something I had never done before. I stopped sending money. Around noon, my phone rang. Mom. I let it ring. 30 seconds later. She called again. Then Dad. Then Emily. By the end of the day, I had 15 missed calls and 9 text messages. Mom, sweetheart, your father's treatment is scheduled for tomorrow. We really need that money. Dad, please don't ignore us. This is a matter of life and death. I stared at the messages without replying. Life and death? The night before, I'd watched him dance around the living room with a glass of champagne in his hand. The lies no longer hurt. They disgusted me. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work. Instead of heading to the office, I drove to the hospital where my father was supposedly receiving treatment. The receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. How can I help you? I'm looking for information about my father, Robert Sinclair. He's been receiving treatment here for several months. She typed his name into the computer. A few seconds passed. Then she frowned. I'm sorry, ma'am. We don't have any patient by that name. My heart pounded. Could you check again? Maybe under a different department? She searched a second time. Nothing. I'm sorry, but there's no record of him ever being treated here. I thanked her and walked back to my car. For a few minutes, I just sat there. Even though I'd heard them confess everything, part of me had hoped there was some misunderstanding. There wasn't. Every hospital bill. Every medical emergency. Every tear my mother cried over the phone had been nothing more than an elaborate performance. I opened my banking app. One transfer after another appeared on the screen. 5,000. 10,000. 7,500. 20,000. Month after month. Year after year. The total made my stomach turn. $327,450. Over $300,000. Money that could have bought my dream home. Money I'd earned through years of hard work. Money my own family had stolen through manipulation and lies. I closed the app and wiped away a single tear. That would be my last one. Because from this moment on, I wasn't their victim anymore. I was building a case. And I was about to discover that the Sinclair family's biggest secret had nothing to do with fake medical bills. It was far worse. I spent the next 2 weeks doing something my family never expected. I stayed quiet. When my mother called, I didn't answer. When Emily texted, I left her on read. When Dad sent another desperate message about his condition, I ignored it completely. Meanwhile, I was busy gathering evidence. Every bank transfer. Every text message asking for money. Every email. Every receipt they had sent me over the years. I printed everything. Then I created a spreadsheet showing exactly how much I'd given them and when. The numbers were horrifying. Some months, I'd sent them more than I'd spent on myself. No wonder I'd never been able to buy my dream home. I'd been financing theirs. One evening, while reviewing old bank statements, I noticed something strange. Several transfers had been sent to an account that wasn't in either of my parents' names. The account belonged to someone named Horizon Coastal Properties, LLC. I'd never heard of it. Curious, I searched the company online. Within seconds, the information appeared on my screen. It was a real estate investment company. My pulse quickened. I dug deeper. Public property records were easy to access. I entered the company's name. A list of properties appeared. Luxury condos. Vacation rentals. Beachfront homes. Then one address caught my attention. It was only 20 minutes from my parents' house. I drove there the following afternoon. The neighborhood was breathtaking. Palm trees lined the streets. Luxury homes overlooked the water. As I slowly passed one beautiful white beach house, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. My father's black SUV. The same one I'd seen parked in their driveway. It was sitting in front of the house. I parked across the street and watched. A few minutes later, the front door opened. My parents walked out. Emily followed behind them. They were laughing. Then a real estate agent stepped outside carrying a folder. He shook my father's hand. Congratulations, Mr. Sinclair. Once the final payment clears next week, the house is officially yours. My father smiled from ear to ear. We couldn't have done it without our daughter. Everyone laughed. They weren't talking about Emily. They were talking about me. They had used my money to buy themselves a beachfront dream home, while convincing me they couldn't afford life-saving medical care. I raised my phone and quietly recorded the entire conversation from inside my car. That single video became the final piece of evidence I needed. But fate wasn't finished helping me. As the real estate agent walked back inside, he said something that made my heart skip. I'll see you all at the closing next Friday. Don't forget to bring Melissa Sinclair. Since the money came from her account, she'll need to sign one final document. I froze. Sign a document? What document? Had they forged something in my name? Or were they planning one last betrayal? Sat frozen in my car. My name. The real estate agent had just said my name. There shouldn't be any problems, my mother said with a confident smile. Melissa trusts us. She signs anything we put in front of her. The agent nodded. As long as she signs the final gift affidavit and acknowledgement, everything will be complete. Gift affidavit? My heart sank. That meant they weren't just stealing my money. They were trying to make it look like I had voluntarily gifted them hundreds of thousands of dollars. If I signed those papers, I'd lose any chance of recovering the money. I quietly drove away before anyone noticed me. Back at my apartment, I immediately called an attorney. The receptionist scheduled me for the following morning. Attorney Daniel Harper listened patiently as I explained everything. The fake illnesses. The bank transfers. The video I'd recorded. The beach house. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Melissa, he said calmly, the good news is you haven't signed anything yet. So I still have a chance? He nodded. A very good one. He explained that if my family had obtained money through deliberate deception, there could be serious legal consequences. If they try to pressure you into signing those documents, don't refuse. I looked at him in surprise. Don't? He smiled. No. Go. Act like you know nothing. Let them explain everything. And whatever you do. He slid a tiny digital voice recorder across the desk. Record every word. 3 days later, my mother called again. This time, I answered. Oh, sweetheart, she said cheerfully. We've been so worried about you. I've just been busy with work. I understand. Listen, your father has some paperwork that needs your signature. It's nothing complicated. I pretended to sound concerned. Is everything okay? Oh, yes, she laughed. It's just paperwork for one of his financial matters. When do you need me? This Friday. The whole family will be here. I smiled to myself. Of course. I'll be there. After hanging up, I looked at the recorder on my kitchen table. Then I looked at the folder containing every bank statement, text message, and piece of evidence I'd collected. For the first time in weeks. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because on Friday, the Sinclair family thought they were about to trick Melissa Sinclair one last time. Instead, they were walking straight into a trap they would never see coming. Friday morning arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was afraid. Because I was determined not to make a single mistake. Before leaving my apartment, I slipped the tiny voice recorder into my purse and turned it on. Attorney Daniel Harper had given me one last piece of advice. Don't accuse them. Let them talk. The more comfortable they feel, the more they'll reveal. I intended to do exactly that. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I noticed several expensive cars parked outside. Apparently, this wasn't just a family gathering. It was a celebration. My mother opened the front door with a bright smile. Melissa. There you are. She hugged me so tightly that anyone watching would have thought she was the world's most loving mother. Inside, my father looked healthier than I'd ever seen him. He was grilling steaks in the backyard. No oxygen tank. No cane. No signs of the life-threatening illness I'd spent years paying to treat. Emily walked over carrying a glass of champagne. About time you got here. I forced a smile. Traffic. Everyone acted as though nothing had happened. As though they hadn't spent years lying to my face. After dinner, my father cleared his throat. Melissa, sweetheart, we just need one little favor. He placed a thick folder on the dining room table. It'll only take a minute. I glanced at the cover. Property transfer documents. I don't really understand these, I said innocently. My mother laughed. Oh, it's just legal paperwork. The lawyer said your signature is needed because you've been helping us financially. Helping? That was an interesting choice of words. My father slid the papers closer. Just sign where the sticky notes are. I slowly flipped through the pages. Near the back, I found exactly what Daniel had warned me about. Gift affidavit. The document stated that every dollar I'd transferred had been given freely, with no expectation of repayment. If I signed it, I'd be confirming their lie. I looked up. So, this says I gave you all this money as a gift? For the first time all evening. The room became silent. My mother recovered first. That's just legal language. It doesn't really mean anything. Emily rolled her eyes. Melissa, you're overthinking it. Then my father smiled. You trust us, don't you? I looked each of them in the eyes. The people I'd spent my entire life trying to make proud. The people who had stolen my future without a second thought. I gently closed the folder. I do have one question. My mother smiled. Anything. I reached into my purse. Pulled out my phone. Pressed a button. Suddenly, the dining room filled with familiar voices. My mother's voice. Melissa will never figure it out. My father's laughter. As long as she believes I'm sick, she'll keep sending money. Emily's voice. She loves playing the hero. Every face around the table turned white. No one said a word. I looked directly at my parents. Then I calmly said, So, would anyone like to explain why I've been paying for your fake illness, your luxury vacations, and your beach house? The silence that followed was louder than any scream. No one moved. No one spoke. The recording continued playing through my phone speaker. My father's voice echoed through the dining room. Once she sends the next payment, we'll finally have enough for the beach house. Then my mother's laughter followed. Melissa has always been easy to manipulate. Emily slowly lowered her glass of champagne. It slipped from her fingers. Crash. The sound of shattered glass broke the silence. My mother was the first to recover. Melissa. She stammered. This isn't what it sounds like. I folded my arms. Really? Then tell me what it sounds like. My father stood up so quickly his chair fell backward. You've been spying on us? I laughed for the first time in weeks. That's your concern? Not the fact that you lied about having cancer? His face turned pale. I never said I had cancer. You didn't have to. You let Mom tell me you needed surgeries. You accepted every dollar I sent. You watched me work overtime because I thought I was saving your life. He opened his mouth but couldn't find the words. Emily suddenly slammed her hand on the table. You have plenty of money, Melissa. I turned toward her. So that makes stealing from me okay? It wasn't stealing, she snapped. You were helping family. I reached into my purse again. This time, I placed a thick folder on the table. What is this? My mother asked nervously. Every bank transfer I've made over the last 8 years. I opened the folder. $327,450. I flipped another page. Every text message asking me for money. Another page. Every fake hospital bill. Another. And every conversation where you lied. My father's confidence disappeared. You've been keeping records? I work in finance, I replied calmly. I keep records of everything. The room fell silent again. Then I said the words none of them expected. I went to the hospital. My mother's eyes widened. They've never treated Dad. I looked directly at my father. They've never even heard of you. No one denied it. Not one person. Finally, my mother burst into tears. We were going to tell you. When? I asked quietly. After you bought us the beach house? She couldn't answer. Then my father tried a different approach. We're your parents. We sacrificed everything for you. I shook my head. No. You sacrificed my future. I sacrificed everything for you. I stood up and closed the folder. I didn't come here to argue. I came to give you a choice. Their eyes followed me. You have 7 days. Return every dollar you stole. Sell the SUV. Cancel the beach house. Pay me back. And if you don't. I paused long enough for every word to sink in. My attorney already has copies of every document, every recording, and every bank statement. Emily gasped. You hired a lawyer? Yes. My father clenched his fists. You wouldn't take your own family to court. I looked him straight in the eyes. The family I loved disappeared the day you decided my love was something to exploit. I picked up my purse and walked toward the front door. Just before leaving, I turned around one last time. Oh, one more thing. The closing attorney called me this morning. They're expecting me next Friday. I'll be there. But I won't be signing your paperwork. I'll be bringing my lawyer instead. The expressions on their faces told me everything. For the first time, The Sinclair family realized their perfect scam was over. I didn't look back as I walked to my car. Behind me, I could hear my mother calling my name. Melissa. Please wait. I kept walking. For years, I had stopped everything whenever they needed me. Now it was their turn to wonder what would happen next. As soon as I got into my car, my phone rang. It was Daniel Harper. How did it go? He asked. I started the engine. They confessed more than I expected. Did they ask you to sign? Yes. Did you? I smiled. Not a chance. Excellent, he replied. Now we have the upper hand. The next morning, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother crying while my father stood beside her with his hands in his pockets. Against my better judgment, I opened the door, but only halfway. Mom immediately reached for my hand. Melissa, please, let us explain. I've listened to your explanations for 8 years. This time, I'm not interested. Tears streamed down her face. We made mistakes. I stared at her. Mistakes? Forgetting my birthday is a mistake. Buying the wrong Christmas gift is a mistake. Stealing over $300,000 from your daughter is a choice. She lowered her head. Dad stepped forward. We'll pay you back. I crossed my arms. How? We'll figure something out. No, I said firmly. I've heard enough promises. If you're serious, sell the SUV. Neither of them answered. Sell the beach house. Again. Silence. That silence told me everything. They wanted my forgiveness. They didn't want accountability. I'm done. I closed the door. 3 days later, Daniel called with unexpected news. Melissa, I just received a phone call from the closing attorney. I frowned. What happened? Your parents tried to complete the purchase without you. Did it work? No. Why not? Daniel chuckled softly. Because the attorney reviewed the transaction more carefully after I contacted his office. And? The money trail raised serious questions. My heart raced. What kind of questions? He discovered that nearly all of the down payment came directly from your personal bank account. I sat up straighter. So the closing is cancelled? For now. But that's not the interesting part. What is? Daniel paused for a moment. The title company has frozen the transaction until they determine whether fraud was involved. I covered my mouth in disbelief. For the first time, someone outside my family believed me. But less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. It contained only one sentence. If you don't drop this, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot. Without saying a word, I forwarded it directly to Daniel. Because Emily had just made the biggest mistake of her life, I expected another emotional phone call. Another apology. Another excuse. Instead, 2 police officers knocked on my apartment door the following afternoon. For a split second, I thought my parents had reported me for something. One of the officers smiled politely. Ms. Melissa Sinclair? Yes. We're following up on a complaint that was filed against you this morning. A complaint? Your parents claim you stole money from them. I almost laughed. I'm sorry, what? The officer nodded. They stated you've been taking money from their accounts over the past several years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The very people who had stolen more than $300,000 from me were accusing me of stealing from them. Fortunately, I was prepared. I have documents I'd like you to see. I invited them inside. For the next 45 minutes, I showed them everything. The bank transfers. The fake hospital bills. The recorded conversation. The text messages begging for money. Finally, I played the recording where my father proudly said, "As long as she believes I'm sick, she'll keep sending money." The officers exchanged a long look. One of them slowly closed his notebook. Miss Sinclair, thank you for your cooperation. Am I in trouble? He shook his head. No. Based on what you've shown us, it appears the original complaint may itself be false. Before leaving, the older officer said something I'll never forget. If anyone contacts or threatens you again, call us immediately. The moment they left, I called Daniel. They actually tried to have me investigated. I was expecting something like this, he admitted. They're panicking. What happens now? They're running out of options. The following morning, I received another surprise. A woman named Karen Whitmore called me. She introduced herself as the wife of one of my father's closest friends, the same man I'd seen celebrating with my family. "I know you don't know me very well," she said nervously, "but I need to tell you something." I listened carefully. "My husband confessed everything to me last night." My heart skipped a beat. He couldn't live with the guilt anymore. She took a deep breath. "Melissa, your parents have been lying to everyone." "What do you mean?" "They've been telling friends that you happily volunteered to fund their retirement." I closed my eyes. Of course they had. But that's not why I'm calling. My grip tightened around the phone. "What is it?" "They've done this before." I froze. "What?" Karen's voice trembled. "You're not the first member of the family they've manipulated for money." The room suddenly felt cold. There was someone else. "Who?" A long silence followed. Then she quietly answered. "Your grandmother." I felt my knees weaken. "My grandmother?" Karen sighed. "Melissa, your grandmother didn't lose her house because of bad investments. She lost it because your parents convinced her to sign everything over to them." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. Everything I believed about my family was about to become even darker. I didn't sleep that night. Karen's words echoed in my mind. "You're not the first member of the family they've manipulated." My grandmother had passed away 5 years earlier. Everyone in the family said she'd lost her home after making a series of bad investments. I had believed them. Now, I wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The next morning, I met Karen at a small coffee shop downtown. She looked nervous as she handed me a large manila envelope. "I've kept these for years," she said. "I always thought something wasn't right." Inside were photocopies of old letters, bank records, and property documents. One document immediately caught my attention. It showed that my grandmother had transferred ownership of her home to my parents just 6 months before she moved into a nursing facility. "She didn't want to do it," Karen said quietly. "How do you know?" "My husband told me everything." She looked down at her coffee. "Your parents convinced her they needed the house as collateral for a business loan. They promised they'd transfer it back once the loan was approved." My stomach turned. "They never did." Karen slowly shook her head. "They sold the house less than a year later." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "They lied to their own mother?" Karen nodded. And after she realized what had happened, she was heartbroken. A tear rolled down Karen's cheek. She died believing her own children had betrayed her. I sat there in silence, trying to hold back my emotions. The people who raised me, the people I trusted more than anyone, had destroyed my grandmother's final years for money. Then Karen reached into her purse one last time. "There's something else." She handed me a small flash drive. "My husband made copies before he left." "Copies of what?" "Emails." "What kind of emails?" "The ones your father exchanged with the real estate agent." I stared at the flash drive. Karen lowered her voice. "Melissa, those emails prove they planned this years before your father ever pretended to be sick." My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a desperate decision. It was a long-term plan. They knew exactly how to make you feel responsible. I left the coffee shop and drove straight to Daniel's office. When he finished reading the documents and opened the files from the flash drive, he slowly leaned back in his chair. For nearly a minute, he didn't say a word. Finally, he looked at me. "Melissa." His expression was unlike anything I'd seen before. "What is it?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "I think this is no longer just a civil case." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He closed the laptop. "If these emails are authentic, your parents may have committed multiple crimes." The room fell silent. For years, I'd wanted my family to tell the truth. Now, the truth was about to cost them everything. I stared at Daniel. "Crimes?" He nodded. "Potentially fraud. Wire fraud. Forgery. And if they knowingly used false documents to obtain your money." He paused. "The consequences could be severe." I sank into the chair. I had spent weeks preparing myself to sue my parents. I had never imagined they could face criminal charges. "I don't want revenge," I whispered. "I just wanted the truth." Daniel gave me a sympathetic look. "I know. But once fraud reaches this level, the decision may no longer be yours." He organized the evidence into separate folders. The recordings. The fake hospital bills. The property documents. The emails. And the threatening text from your sister. He looked at me. We have more than enough to move forward. 3 days later, my parents received official letters from the court notifying them of the civil lawsuit. Within hours, my phone exploded with calls. I ignored every one. Then a voicemail came through. It was my father. His voice no longer sounded confident. Melissa, please. We can fix this. I know we made mistakes. But don't destroy this family. I deleted the message. 20 minutes later, my mother called. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail too. We'll sell the beach house. We'll sell the SUV. We'll pay you back. Just please, withdraw the lawsuit. For the first time. They weren't asking because they loved me. They were asking because they had finally realized there would be consequences. A week later, Daniel and I arrived at the courthouse for the first hearing. As I walked through the front doors, I saw my parents sitting quietly on a wooden bench. They looked exhausted. Emily sat beside them, avoiding my eyes. No one smiled. No one waved. When my mother saw me, she stood up. Melissa. I stopped a few feet away. I'm sorry. She burst into tears. I should have protected you. I should have told your father no. I should have stopped this years ago. I listened without saying a word. Then my father stood. I was greedy. I kept telling myself we'd pay you back. But every time you sent more money, it became easier to ask for more. For the first time in my life, he admitted the truth. But it was too late. The courtroom doors opened. The clerk called our case. As everyone stood to enter, Daniel leaned toward me and whispered. No matter what happens today, you've already won. I looked at my family one last time. Not with hatred. Not with anger. But with acceptance. Some betrayals can be forgiven. Others change your life forever. I took a deep breath. And walked into the courtroom. The courtroom was silent. The judge reviewed the thick stack of evidence for several minutes. Every page told the same story. Years of lies. Years of manipulation. Years of financial deception. My parents sat at the defense table with their attorney, refusing to look at me. Emily sat behind them, nervously twisting a tissue in her hands. Daniel stood and presented our case. He played the audio recording. The courtroom filled with my father's voice. As long as she believes I'm sick, she'll keep sending money. Then my mother's voice followed. Melissa will never figure it out. The judge removed his glasses and looked directly at my parents. Is this your voice? My father lowered his head. Yes, Your Honor. And did you knowingly accept hundreds of thousands of dollars from your daughter under false pretenses? After a long silence, he whispered. Yes. A gasp spread through the courtroom. My mother began crying uncontrollably. Emily buried her face in her hands. Daniel then presented the fake hospital bills, the bank transfers, the threatening text messages, and the emails showing they had planned the deception years in advance. When he finished, the judge folded his hands. This court has rarely seen a betrayal of trust this severe within a family. He looked at me. Miss Sinclair, you've shown remarkable restraint throughout these proceedings. Then he turned back to my parents. You exploited your daughter's love and generosity for your own financial gain. The evidence is overwhelming. After a brief recess, the judge returned with his ruling. He ordered my parents to repay every dollar they had fraudulently obtained from me. The beach house would be sold. The luxury SUV would be sold. Several investment accounts purchased with my money were frozen and ordered liquidated. The proceeds would go toward reimbursing me. The judge also referred the case to the district attorney's office for a criminal investigation into possible fraud and forgery. As the hearing ended, my parents looked completely defeated. For the first time in years, there were no excuses. No lies. Only consequences. As everyone began leaving the courtroom, my mother slowly walked toward me. She stopped a few feet away. I know you probably hate us. I looked at her quietly. I don't hate you. She looked surprised. I just don't trust you anymore. Tears streamed down her face. I wish we could go back. I nodded sadly. So do I. But some choices can't be undone. I turned and walked away. This time, no one called my name. No one asked me to stay. Because they finally understood. Melissa Sinclair was no longer the woman they could manipulate. She was finally free. 6 months later, I stood on the front porch of a beautiful 2-story home just outside Chicago. It wasn't a mansion. It didn't overlook the ocean. But it was mine. Every brick represented a fresh start. The court-ordered sale of the beach house, the luxury SUV, and several investment accounts had allowed me to recover most of the money my parents had taken. While I never received every single dollar back because of legal fees and assets that had already been spent, I recovered enough to finally make the down payment on the home I'd dreamed about for years. As I unlocked the front door for the first time, I smiled. Not because I'd won. But because I was finally free. Life slowly returned to normal. I threw myself into my career and accepted another promotion at work. For the first time in years, I took a real vacation. I visited the mountains, spent time hiking, and realized how peaceful life could be when I wasn't constantly carrying someone else's burdens. I also started volunteering at a local financial literacy program. Every month, I met people who had been manipulated by relatives, friends, or scammers. I shared my story, not to embarrass my family, but to remind others that love should never require deception. If someone truly loves you, they don't build their happiness on your sacrifice. As for my family, the criminal investigation eventually ended with plea agreements. My parents admitted to multiple counts of fraud and forgery. They were ordered to pay additional restitution, perform community service, and remain under strict court supervision. Emily avoided jail because of her limited role, but she was required to cooperate with investigators and repay the money she personally received. None of them contacted me again. Not after the final hearing. Not after the sentencing. Not even on my birthday. And, surprisingly, that silence became a gift. One crisp autumn afternoon, I visited my grandmother's grave. I placed a bouquet of white lilies beside her headstone. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry I didn't know the truth sooner." A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. For the first time, I felt as though a weight had finally lifted. "I got your justice," I said softly. And I finally found mine. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Daniel Harper. "Congratulations on your new home. You earned every bit of it." I smiled and replied, "Thank you, for helping me believe that the truth was worth fighting for." I put my phone away, looked toward the horizon, and took a deep breath. My family's betrayal had changed my life. But it didn't define it. From that day forward, I made a promise to myself. I would never confuse love with obligation again. Because the greatest lesson I learned wasn't how to expose a lie. It was learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from the people who refuse to value you.